The red wine hit Adam's face like a slap, staining his custom white shirt in front of the whole restaurant. A cold, sticky stream ran down his cheek as Bethany Thorne's sharp, amused laughter cut through the sudden hush. "God, why are you always such an idiot?" she sneered, her eyes gleaming with disdain. The red wine ran in streaks down Adam's cheek, cold and surprisingly viscous. It soaked into the crisp white fabric of his custom-made shirt, blooming like a dark rose against his chest. Bethany Thorne's laughter, sharp and unapologetically amused, carved a hole in the sudden, quiet dining room. Her sneer followed, precise and practiced. "God, why are you always acting like such an idiot?" she said, loud enough for the tables around them to hear. Adam didn't move immediately. He felt the eyes of the other patrons, a flicker of discomfort quickly averted. He looked at Bethany, whose smile didn't quite reach her eyes. He'd only tried to correct her gently about the specific origin of the Cabernet Sauvignon she was discussing. It was Napa, not Sonoma, a detail she'd gotten wrong. A small thing, he thought, but to Bethany, it was an unforgivable offense. "I just said it was a Napa vineyard, not Sonoma," he reiterated, his voice low, betraying none of the rising heat in his stomach. Her mouth tightened. "You contradicted me in front of everyone," she hissed, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, but still carrying. She looked around as if inviting the room to share her indignation. The acidic wine began to sting slightly where it had seeped into a small cut near his hairline. Humiliation, a familiar guest, settled in his chest, heavy and burning. Every instinct screamed at him to lash out, to defend himself, but he merely reached for a napkin. He dabbed at his face, the paper absorbing the sticky redness, a pointless gesture against the ruined shirt. He stood, pushing his chair back with a soft scrape that felt deafening in the charged silence. He adjusted the lapels of his soaked jacket, a futile attempt to reclaim some dignity. As he turned to leave, Bethany's voice, now laced with outright mockery, followed him. "Oh, look at Mr. Drama Queen pouting again. Go on, run along." He walked past the hostess, past the curious glances, out into the cool evening air. The scent of red wine clung to him, a cloying reminder of the past 10 minutes. In his car, the interior still held the faint smell of leather and polish, suddenly mixed with the sweet, fermented odor. He started the engine. The realization settled in him, cold and solid, cutting through the haze of anger and shame. This wasn't just another cruel joke, another casual humiliation. This, he knew with a chilling certainty, was the last straw. Adam drove the familiar route home on autopilot. His mind, usually a quiet place, began to churn through years of Bethany's cutting remarks. The dismissals, the way she treated him like an accessory, barely there unless she needed him for something. He remembered the dinner parties where she'd interjected, finishing his sentences, or the way she'd laugh when he tried to tell a story. He remembered the feeling of being erased, piece by piece. He pulled into their driveway, the house dark except for the soft glow of a security light. Inside, the perfectly curated decor, chosen by Bethany, seemed to mock him with its sterile elegance. He walked past the pristine living room, past the dining area with its untouched centerpiece, and into the small room Bethany begrudgingly called his office. It was a space relegated to him, always just a little too small, a little too out of the way. He sat at the desk, staring at his faint reflection in the dark laptop screen. His jaw felt tight. That was about to change. He opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life. From the small drawer, he pulled out a fresh notepad, its pages crisp and blank. He picked up the Mont Blanc pen, a gift from Bethany years ago, given with a flourish he now recognized as more about her than him. He clicked it open, the satisfying snap echoing in the quiet room. He began to write. Not prose, not a letter, but a list. Every insult, every humiliation, every instance he'd swallowed his pride for the sake of peace, for the sake of her. The words flowed, raw and unfiltered. He detailed the evening Bethany had lied to her friends about his employment, claiming he was taking a sabbatical rather than admitting he was consulting independently. He remembered the sharp sting of her public criticism of his Harbor View project in front of Mr. Henderson at a charity event, making him look foolish and incompetent. He wrote about Mark Jensen's wedding, where she'd openly mocked his choice of suit, her voice carrying across the reception hall. The list grew page after page, each line a small, sharp shard of memory. As the ink filled the pages, a truth he'd denied for so long solidified. It had never been him. It had always been her. And now Adam realized it was over. It was close to midnight when Bethany's car pulled into the driveway. She usually expected him to be in bed, asleep. Tonight, he was waiting. He sat at the kitchen table, the notepad open before him, the laptop closed beside it. Her key turned in the lock. The door opened and closed. He heard the familiar click of her heels on the hardwood floor as she came into the kitchen. Her initial smirk, still carrying the ghost of the restaurant incident, faltered when she saw him. Adam picked up the notepad, holding it up slightly. His voice was calm, steady. "I made a list," he said. "Everything you have ever done to me." Her brow furrowed, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. But then her usual dismissive mask returned. "Oh, Adam, honestly, are you going to throw a tantrum now? You're being childish." He closed the notepad with a soft thud. "This," Adam said, his gaze unwavering, "was the last time you'll ever get to humiliate me." He picked up the notepad and his laptop, then walked past her, leaving Bethany frozen in the middle of the kitchen, muttering something about him being a child. Adam heard Bethany's footsteps recede down the hall, then the distant click of the television in the living room. He closed his bedroom door, the old knob turning with a soft, final thud, and then he engaged the lock. It wasn't a defiant gesture, not really. It was a practical one. For years he'd capitulated, softened his stance, sought peace at any cost. Tonight, a quiet resolve, cool and steady, had taken its place. He didn't sleep. Instead, he pulled out his laptop again, opening new spreadsheets. He spent the rest of the night meticulously documenting Bethany's financial habits. He had access to joint accounts, shared credit card statements, the designer clothes, the frivolous girls' trips to Scottsdale or Miami, the increasingly frequent spa days and boutique shopping sprees. He logged the dates, the amounts, the vendors. Each entry a small, precise chisel chipping away at the foundation of their life. The numbers laid bare a pattern of unchecked expenditure, a stark contrast to his own more restrained habits. The next morning, the house was quiet. Adam came into the kitchen to find Bethany already there, making coffee. She acted as if nothing had happened, as if the wine, the list, and his quiet departure were just another forgettable Tuesday night. "Morning, sweetie," she said, her voice light, dismissive. She didn't look at him directly at first, just at the steam rising from her mug. But when she finally did, Adam met her gaze without flinching. There was no anger in his eyes, no hurt, just a steady, unreadable calm. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then quickly returned, a little less convincing. He started researching, not overtly, not with obvious searches, but through discreet browsing, reading articles, cross-referencing names. He was looking for a specific type of divorce lawyer, someone low profile, not flashy, but tenacious, with a reputation for quietly handling complex asset divisions. Someone who wouldn't inflame the situation unnecessarily, but would secure his interests. Simultaneously, Adam began keeping a separate log, this one less about money, more about time. He noted Bethany's daily routines, the increasingly late-night returns from her charity meetings, the frequent business trips she took, often lasting longer than strictly necessary, to cities where her vague descriptions of work seemed to evaporate under closer scrutiny. He cross-referenced these with his own calendar, looking for patterns, discrepancies. A few days later, a quiet conversation with Mr. Henderson, one of the senior partners at the firm, provided another piece of the puzzle. They were discussing a project, and Mr. Henderson mentioned, almost in passing, "You know, Adam, I always wondered about that Bayfront proposal. Bethany made it sound like you weren't fully committed, pushed for a younger architect. Good thing I went with my gut on your abilities." Adam felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. It wasn't the first time. He recalled another subtle remarks Bethany had made to colleagues over the years, seemingly innocent jokes that had actually chipped away at his professional standing, painting him as less ambitious, less dedicated. One evening, while backing up some old files, Adam stumbled upon an old email. It was from Bethany to a friend, dated years ago, a casual exchange. Deep within the thread, almost hidden, was a line. Adam's little projects always take a backseat to real ambition. You know how it is. The words, meant as a joke, landed with a fresh sting, confirming a long-held suspicion that she saw his work as less important, less valid than her own nebulous pursuits. He opened a new bank account, discreet, untraceable from their joint finances. Slowly, carefully, he began to transfer small, untraceable amounts of his own earnings into it. Not large sums that would trigger alerts, but enough over time to build a foundation. A few weeks later, Bethany was in her element, planning a lavish charity gala benefiting a local art museum. She insisted Adam escort her, making it clear it was for appearances. The night of the event, she floated through the room in a shimmering gown, publicly praising her own philanthropy, recounting tales of her tireless efforts, all while subtly demeaning his architectural career. Adam's work is so structural, she'd say with a tinkling laugh. Mine is more about community. Adam, nursing a bourbon, observed her interactions. He noticed a particular rapport she shared with Carl Peterson, a prominent local developer. They talked longer than she talked to anyone else. A lingering gaze, a shared private joke that made her laugh a little too loudly. Carl's hand lingered on her arm for a moment. It wasn't overt, but it was enough. 2 days after the gala, an anonymous email arrived. The subject line was blank. The body contained only a blurry photo, taken from a distance, of Bethany and Carl Peterson. They were dining intimately at a dimly lit restaurant. Not one of their usual downtown haunts, but a place Adam recognized as being on the far side of the county, tucked away, discreet. The discovery, while not entirely surprising, still landed with a quiet thud. It solidified a suspicion that had been growing, a shadow that had been lengthening. Bethany had been having an affair. He didn't feel rage. Instead, a cold calm settled over him, sharper than before. This wasn't just humiliation now. This was clear, undeniable betrayal. It gave his list a new, harder edge. He knew exactly what he needed to do. That evening, he waited until Bethany was in the kitchen, casually scrolling through her phone. "I saw Carl Peterson at the gala," Adam said, his voice even. "Has he started that new commercial complex project yet? The one he was talking about." He watched her. Her head snapped up. Her eyes, usually so composed, flicked nervously, her guard immediately going up. Bethany dismissed his questions with a sharp wave of her hand. "Mind your own business, Adam," she snapped, her tone suddenly brittle. Then she added with a sarcastic curl of her lip, "What's with your sudden interest in my work anyway?" Adam walked through the house, assessing angles and sightlines with an architect's eye. His home office, small and strategically placed, overlooked the main living area, the kitchen, and part of the hall. He used his skills, familiar with integrating technology seamlessly into structures, to discreetly install a small, non-recording camera. It was designed to monitor motion, to give him a sense of who was coming and going when. A simple device, almost invisible, just above the door frame. No audio, no continuous feed, just snapshots of activity that could be reviewed later. It wasn't about catching her in the act, not anymore. It was about filling in the gaps. He noticed Bethany's phone habits had shifted. More secrecy, calls taken in the pantry or the spare bedroom, her voice hushed, almost a whisper. Texts received with a quick glance and an immediate tucking away of the device. The little changes, once dismissed as quirks, now clicked into place as fragments of a larger pattern. He called Mark Jensen, an old college friend and a cybersecurity expert. "Hey, Mark," Adam said, keeping his tone casual. "Listen, I've got a big project coming up. Sensitive stuff. I need to keep an eye on some contractors. Make sure they're not overreaching. Any advice on discreet monitoring, maybe something with digital footprints?" It was a subtle lie, precise enough to seem plausible. Mark, ever perceptive, didn't ask direct questions about the contractors. He simply listened, a quiet hum on the line. "Sounds like a headache, pal," he said. "And for digital privacy, focus on secure backups, encrypted drives, keep everything off shared servers. And sometimes," Mark added, his voice softer, "the best thing you can do is just talk it out, you know?" He offered practical advice on open source encryption tools and secure cloud storage. a tacit acknowledgement of Adam's unstated distress. Following Mark's subtle cues, Adam began a deeper dive. He started with their shared cloud drive, an archive of documents and photos from their years together. It took hours, late into the night, but he finally uncovered a hidden folder. It was encrypted, tucked away in a subdirectory, labeled innocuously. He spent sleepless nights at his desk, the glow of the laptop screen painting his face blue. Using the open-source tools Mark had mentioned, he worked through the encryption, line by line, character by character, until the files began to open. First, intimate messages, then photos. Between Bethany and Carl Peterson, texts planning secret meetings, declarations of affection, descriptions of stolen moments. The digital evidence laid bare the full extent of Bethany's affair. It was explicit, undeniable. This cut deeper than any public humiliation. It wasn't just about his pride anymore. It was about the deliberate destruction of their shared life. The pain was still there, but it was now transmuted into a cold, resolute purpose. As he sifted through the digital detritus, he uncovered something else. Another set of encrypted files, carefully disguised as invoices. When decrypted, they revealed Bethany had been siphoning off funds from their joint accounts. Not grand, obvious amounts, but consistent, smaller sums. They were disguised as consulting fees or project expenses for her father's company, Thorne and Associates. It was a subtle, intricate fraud designed to be overlooked, built on the assumption that Adam wouldn't look too closely. He worked methodically. Every incriminating message, every photo, every fraudulent financial record was meticulously copied, backed up, and stored in multiple secure locations. USB drives encrypted and locked away. Encrypted cloud accounts, completely separate from anything tied to their shared digital ecosystem. He was building an undeniable case. With the evidence collected, Adam made an appointment, Mrs. Hayes, a no-nonsense Midwestern attorney recommended by a former colleague as tough but fair. Her office was functional, not opulent, filled with stacks of legal briefs. He laid out his case, not with emotion, but with cold, precise facts. The timeline of the affair, backed by digital evidence. The financial misconduct, with detailed spreadsheets. Ms. Hayes listened, her expression unreadable behind her thick-rimmed glasses. "This changes things, Adam," she said, her voice gravelly. She advised him on the legal implications of the affair, particularly concerning the division of assets in a no-fault state. The financial misconduct, disguised as business expenses for Thorne and Associates, complicated matters significantly. "Her father, Frank Thorne, will likely intervene," she warned. "He's a powerful man in this town. We need to be prepared." Armed with legal counsel, Adam took the next step. He quietly secured a new apartment, smaller, functional, on the other side of town. He found a place near his office, tucked away from their usual haunts. He told Bethany casually, "I need a quiet space for a big project. Somewhere I can just spread out and work without distractions." Bethany, wrapped up in her own affairs, barely registered his news. She merely shrugged, waving a dismissive hand. "Do whatever you need to, Adam. Just don't expect me to visit." She didn't ask about the project, didn't offer help. Her indifference was palpable, and in a strange way, liberating. He began moving his most essential belongings, his architectural drawings rolled and secured, a few boxes of books, sentimental items from his pre-Bethany life. He moved them bit by bit, under the cover of evening, in the trunk of his car. Each box, each trip, felt like a small act of reclamation. The finality of moving his things out of the house that was once theirs brought a strange sense of quiet anticipation. It wasn't sadness. It was a feeling of finally taking control, of building something new, brick by solitary brick. The amber glow of the pub lights cast long shadows across the worn wooden table. Adam nursed his beer, the condensation cold against his hand. Across from him, Mark Jensen listened, his expression shifting from casual interest to quiet shock. Adam, finally unburdening himself, laid it all out. Bethany's affair, the detailed financial deceptions, the years of subtle undermining. The words came out steadily, factually, devoid of any raw emotion, almost as if he were recounting someone else's story. "She's been siphoning money, Mark," Adam concluded, through her dad's company, disguised as fees. Mark pushed his own beer aside. Adam, he said, his voice low. I had no idea. I mean, I knew things were strained, but this is big. He leaned forward. Look, I'm here for whatever you need. Emotionally, sure, but if there's anything else, any technical stuff, any more digging, let me know. We'll figure it out. Back in Ms. Hayes' office, the legal strategy took shape, sharp and unyielding. We leveraged the infidelity and the financial fraud, she stated, her pen tapping a legal pad. No fault state or not, this evidence provides significant leverage for a favorable settlement. And she paused, meeting his gaze. We ensure public exposure, especially regarding Thorne and Associates. Adam nodded. He knew Frank Thorne's meticulous pride in his company. That was Bethany's true Achilles heel. Adam didn't move overtly. He didn't scream. He didn't confront. Instead, he started with an anonymous, encrypted email. The recipient was Carl Peterson's wife, a woman Adam barely knew socially. The email was short, precise, containing only a single subtle hint, a date, a time, and the name of a restaurant far from their usual haunts. Just enough to trigger her own investigation, to plant a seed of doubt she couldn't ignore. He began planting seeds in Bethany's social circle too. Casual remarks to acquaintances at Rotary meetings, at the country club. Bethany's been traveling so much lately, hasn't she? All those business trips must be really intense work. He let the words hang, allowing others to draw their own conclusions, to let the whispers start. His next task was to solidify the financial link. He already had the encrypted files. Now he needed irrefutable proof of Bethany's direct access and control over the siphoned funds and how they directly translated to her personal spending. He cross-referenced the disguised fees with her credit card statements, with the dates of lavish purchases that went beyond their usual lifestyle. The paper trail was clear, damning. Working with Ms. Hayes, he drafted a detailed, non-negotiable settlement proposal. It was based on his meticulous findings, designed to ensure Bethany would lose significant financial standing and, crucially, public face. It accounted for everything: the siphoned funds, the damage to his professional reputation, the emotional distress. Bethany, oblivious, seemed to exist in her own gilded cage. She frequently boasted about Carl Peterson's upcoming investment in Thorne Associates, casually mentioning it to friends, even to Adam himself. Carl's really impressed with my vision for Dad's company, she'd say, a smug satisfaction in her voice. She had no idea her boasting only highlighted her precarious position, unknowingly connecting her lover to her father's business in a way that would soon unravel. Adam quietly informed Mr. Henderson about his impending divorce. He painted himself as the wronged husband, the victim of a situation he had tried to salvage for years. It's been a long time coming, Mr. Henderson, he said, his voice laced with a subtle weariness. Just couldn't ignore it anymore. It's a shame, really. Mr. Henderson, a man who valued loyalty and discretion, offered sympathetic support. You do what you need to, Adam. We'll support you here. He spent hours meticulously gathering old receipts, bank statements, and credit card records, creating a comprehensive, undeniable timeline of Bethany's deceit. Every transaction, every date, every lie. Mark Jensen proved invaluable. Using his discreet network and technical expertise, Mark helped Adam observe Carl Peterson's movements. It led them to a secluded lakeside cabin, hidden deep in the woods, far from any main road. A place where secrecy was paramount. Mark's surveillance confirmed it. Carl's regular rendezvous with Bethany there. Adam went alone for the final confirmation. He parked his car a good distance away, concealed by the dense foliage. With a telephoto lens, careful to maintain his distance, he took the photographs. Bethany's car, Carl's car, them entering the cabin, them leaving, hours later, together. The images were clear, damning. A few days later, an anonymous package arrived at the corporate offices of Thorne and Associates. It contained the photographic evidence, printed copies of the intimate messages, and a brief, factual summary of the financial fraud, cross-referenced with the fraudulent invoices. It was addressed to the board of directors. Adam felt the weight of his actions. He understood this path was irreversible. There was no going back, no softening, no second chances. But the years of pain, the quiet humiliations, the steady erosion of his self-worth fueled his resolve. He would see this through. The morning light streamed into the kitchen, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Bethany was at the island, scrolling through her phone, sipping coffee. Adam walked in holding a slim folder. He placed it quietly on the granite countertop, directly in front of her. Bethany glanced up, a faint smile on her lips, a casual morning, ready on her tongue. Her eyes, however, landed on the folder. The top page clearly read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Her smile evaporated. Her jaw dropped. She picked up the papers, her fingers fumbling slightly. Her initial disbelief turned quickly to explosive anger as her eyes scanned the meticulously detailed pages. The sections outlining her infidelity, the financial irregularities, the precise dates and amounts. Her face contorted, a mask of fury replacing her usual cool composure. "What the hell is this, Adam?" she screamed, her voice piercing the morning quiet. She threw the papers back onto the counter. "You've gone completely insane." Adam remained calm, his expression unreadable. He pulled another stack of papers from his pocket, a printout of the encrypted messages and photos with Carl Peterson, laid them next to the divorce papers. The images were clear, undeniable. "I think you know exactly what this is, Bethany," he said, his voice level, devoid of any accusation or emotion. She snatched up the photos, eyes wide, then crumpled them in her fist. "These are doctored. They're fake. You fabricated these, you pathetic, jealous man. Carl is a business partner. Nothing more." Her voice trembled, a desperate attempt to project confidence that failed miserably. Her hands shook, giving away the lie. Adam then slid over a third set of documents. The evidence of the siphoned funds, the detailed spreadsheets linking her personal purchases to Thorne and Associates accounts, disguised as business expenses. The dates matched, the amounts were precise. Bethany's eyes darted over the columns of numbers. She tried to shift blame, her mind working furiously. "This is ludicrous, Adam. You're the one who never handled our finances properly. I wouldn't be surprised if you were the one mismanaging our money, trying to pin it on me." A harsh, humorless laugh escaped her. She regained some of her composure, a steely glint returning to her eyes. "You think you can ruin me?" she sneered. "My father will crush you. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Adam met her gaze without flinching. "I've dealt with you for 7 years, Bethany," he said quietly. "I have a very clear idea." She stood abruptly, overturning her coffee cup, sending a dark stain blooming across the granite. "You'll regret this, Adam. I'm calling my father right now. You'll be fired, blacklisted from this city, you hear me?" She stormed out of the kitchen, the sound of her furious footsteps receding down the hall. Later that day, the phone rang. The caller ID showed Frank Thorne. Adam answered. "Adam," Frank's voice boomed, cold and menacing. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? Defaming my daughter, trying to extort her? You'll regret this. You don't cross the thorns." Adam took a breath, his grip tightening on the phone. "Frank," he replied, his tone quiet but firm, "I have irrefutable evidence of Bethany's affair and her financial misconduct. I suggest you look into your daughter's actions yourself before making accusations." He briefly outlined the nature of the evidence, the detailed records. The line went silent for a moment, Frank's booming voice momentarily quelled. The conversation ended without resolution, but the weight of it lingered. The confrontation with Bethany, then with Frank Thorne, left Adam drained. But there was also a strange sense of clarity, a renewed purpose. He had committed to this path. There was no turning back. The fight had truly begun. Listeners, as Adam navigates this intricate web of betrayal and retribution, the choices he makes and the consequences he faces will define his future. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The news of Adam and Bethany's impending divorce, carefully fueled by subtle leaks from Adam's side, began to spread through their intertwined social circles. At first, it was hushed gossip at the country club, then bolder whispers at charity functions. Heads turned when Bethany walked into a room. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect life had cracked. Then, the second shoe dropped. Carl Peterson's wife, a quiet woman Adam vaguely knew, filed for divorce, citing infidelity. The local rumor mill, already primed, quickly connected the dots, linking Carl's indiscretion back to Bethany. The scandal, once confined to hushed tones, now felt more public, more concrete. At Thorne and Associates, the board of directors, spurred by the anonymous package Adam had sent, initiated a formal internal investigation into Bethany's financial conduct and her relationship with Carl Peterson. The meticulous evidence Adam provided left them no choice. Ms. Hayes officially presented Bethany's new legal team with the extensive dossier of evidence. It contained every encrypted message, every damning photograph, every detailed financial record. There was no room for denial, no credible way to dismiss it as fabrication. The sheer volume and precision of the data spoke for itself. Frank Thorne, after a tense closed-door meeting with the board and reviewing the preliminary findings, finally confronted his daughter. His fury echoed through the grand, quiet halls of the Thorne estate. "You jeopardize everything, Bethany. Everything I built." His voice was rough with disappointment, far more potent than any anger. The company, his legacy, was his life. Bethany, for the first time in Adam's memory, seemed truly cornered. Her usual bluster and composure faltered. She tried to manipulate her father, painting herself as a victim of Adam's vengeful plot, a jilted husband's cruel machinations. "He's just trying to destroy me, Dad. He's always been jealous of my success." But even to Frank, her words now sounded hollow, desperate. Adam began receiving veiled threats. A late-night call from an unknown number. A black car parked conspicuously outside his new apartment for a few hours. He knew it was from a private investigator, likely hired by Frank Thorne, digging for dirt, looking for any leverage. Ms. Hayes, however, was prepared. She advised him on legal protections, reminded him to log everything, and assured him they had the upper hand. "They're fishing, Adam. Stay clean." A prominent local newspaper, always eager for a juicy story, published a discreet article. It spoke of a high-profile divorce involving infidelity and corporate misconduct, the thinly veiled references pointing undeniably to Bethany and Thorne and Associates. No names were explicitly mentioned, but in a town like theirs, everyone knew. The article was a calculated move, further solidifying the narrative. Adam, in the meantime, quietly began selling some of his less-used assets. The antique Persian rug Bethany had insisted on, a set of expensive golf clubs he barely used. Items tied to their shared aspirational lifestyle. He moved them discreetly, freeing up liquid capital, preparing for the financial future that lay ahead. He focused intently on new architectural projects, independent commissions, carefully rebuilding his professional reputation outside the shadow of Thorne and Associates. He poured his energy into his designs, finding solace in the clean lines and logical construction. Bethany's world, once so vibrant and bustling, began to shrink. Her social invitations dried up. Her once giggling friends, now hearing the gossip, stopped returning her calls, their loyalties shifting with the prevailing winds of public opinion. Her reputation, meticulously cultivated over years, was crumbling around her. Adam felt a brief pang of something akin to sadness as he observed the slow unraveling of Bethany's life. He remembered the early days, the charm, the ambition that had once drawn him in, but he quickly suppressed it, pushing the feeling away. He remembered her sharp, amused laughter as the red wine hit his face. He remembered the casual cruelty. The sadness was swiftly replaced by a cold, steady determination. The court dates were set. The local community, a town hungry for drama, anticipated a dramatic legal battle. But Adam, advised by Ms. Hayes, hoped for a quiet, swift resolution. He preferred precision over spectacle. He dedicated his time to his new apartment, designing it piece by piece to be a true home for himself, a space free from Bethany's influence, from her curated taste. It was his new beginning, functional, elegant, and entirely his own. The divorce proceedings began with a stark, cold efficiency. Bethany's initial bluster and her legal team's attempts to discredit Adam were systematically dismantled. Ms. Hayes was methodical, precise. Each piece of evidence, from the intimate messages to the detailed financial ledgers, was laid out with unassailable clarity. There were no theatrics, just facts. one after another building an undeniable case. Frank Thorne, a man who prided himself on his reputation and his company's standing, understood the implications. The potential harm to Thorne and Associates, the public scandal, far outweighed any paternal loyalty. In a terse public statement, he distanced himself from his daughter's conduct, referring to it as a personal matter with no bearing on the company's integrity. Bethany was forced to step down from her position at Thorne and Associates. The news of her humiliating public resignation, meticulously reported by the local paper that had initially hinted at the scandal, echoed through the city's business circles. The carefully cultivated image of the driven, philanthropic executive shattered. Her credit cards were frozen. The luxurious lifestyle she had taken for granted, the designer clothes, the exclusive dining, the endless shopping, crumbled into an abrupt financial reality. The shock was palpable, a harsh awakening from a dream of entitlement. Carl Peterson, too, paid a steep price. He settled his own divorce at a considerable cost, financially and socially. He became a pariah in their elite social circles, his reputation as a respected developer irrevocably stained. He cut off all contact with Bethany, retreating from the fallout, leaving her isolated. Adam experienced a quiet backlash from a few of Bethany's remaining loyalists, mostly friends of her mother. Whispers followed him at certain gatherings. A few invitations went unextended. But their attempts at social ostracism were ineffective. His architectural firm was gaining new respected clients, impressed by his quiet resilience and the undeniable quality of his work, rather than his past connections. He was building something new, brick by honest brick. Bethany, stripped of her influence and her carefully constructed life, resorted to sending angry, vitriolic messages to Adam. Email after email, texts filled with accusations and bitter recriminations. He simply archived them, unread, without response. They were just more evidence, more noise he no longer needed to hear. One afternoon, he saw her by chance at a grocery store on the edge of town, a place they rarely frequented. She pushed a cart, her hair less polished, her clothes less coordinated, not quite disheveled, but certainly not her usual immaculate self. Her eyes, catching his for a brief moment, held a haunted, desperate look he'd never seen before. She quickly averted her gaze, her face coloring, and hurried down another aisle. It was a stark contrast to the confident, imperious woman he had married. Adam felt a complex mix of vindication and weariness. The revenge, meticulously executed, was fulfilling in its own cold way. But the emotional cost had been heavy. He'd spent years in a marriage that slowly eroded him, and then months meticulously dismantling it. So Hayes, true to her word, successfully argued for a divorce settlement that heavily favored Adam. He recouped his financial losses, secured a fair share of the remaining assets, and was left with enough to build his new life. Bethany, stripped of the siphoned funds and much of her leverage, was left with a fraction of her former wealth. The judge's final ruling cited Bethany's infidelity and financial misconduct as primary factors, a public record of her actions etched into legal history. After the final papers were signed, Adam took a solo trip, a quiet cabin nestled deep in the woods up north, far from any city noise. He spent days hiking, reading, and simply being. The quiet of the woods, the rustle of leaves, the scent of pines slowly settled his agitated spirit. He reflected on the long, arduous journey, the years of quiet suffering, the months of deliberate action. He realized that while Bethany had certainly paid a steep price, he too had lost years of his life. The scars of betrayal ran deep, etched into his understanding of trust and love. This part of his life, the old Adam, the old marriage, felt finally over. A chapter violently but decisively closed. The final divorce decree was issued, a dense stack of official papers that formalized the end. Bethany Thorne's public downfall was now complete, undeniable, legally binding. It was no longer gossip or speculation. It was a matter of public record. She was forced to sell the Beacon Hill brownstone, the opulent home she had so meticulously curated, every expensive detail chosen to project an image of success and taste. The sale barely covered her accumulating debts and substantial legal fees. It was a visible, tangible symbol of her undoing. Frank Thorne, still stung by the corporate scrutiny and the dent in his company's reputation, provided only minimal financial support. enough for Bethany to sustain herself, to have a modest roof over her head, but he explicitly refused to prop up her previous extravagant lifestyle. It was a mix of anger, disappointment, and a pragmatic necessity to protect his own assets. "You made your bed, Bethany," Adam imagined him saying. "Now lie in it." Bethany attempted to start a new career. Adam heard through mutual acquaintance snippets of conversation at events he now attended freely. She tried her hand at consulting, then dabbling in PR, but her tarnished reputation, coupled with a genuine lack of tangible skills outside of her father's direct influence, proved to be insurmountable obstacles. The doors that once opened effortlessly to her were now firmly shut. The reports filtered back to Adam. Bethany was struggling to find stable employment. She had moved out of the brownstone and into a much smaller, nondescript apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the social hub she once commanded. He received a final email from her. It wasn't apologetic, not in the slightest. It was full of bitter recriminations, blaming him for everything, calling him spiteful, vindictive. Buried within the venom was a thinly veiled plea for money, a desperate attempt to extract some last resource. Adam read it once, then archived it, adding it to the long, silent digital collection of her final words. He didn't respond. The local newspaper, never one to let a good story die, ran a follow-up piece. It was an editorial about the moral consequences of infidelity and corporate scandal, without naming names, but everyone in their former circle understood perfectly well who they were talking about. It served as a final public pronouncement on Bethany's demise. One quiet evening, Adam sat with Mark Jensen, a cold beer in hand. They talked about the past year, about the intricate maneuvers, the calculated risks. "It took its toll, didn't it?" Mark observed, not a question, but a statement. Adam nodded, gazing into the amber liquid. "Yeah, and," he admitted softly, "it did." The heavy toll the revenge took on him, the years spent enduring, then executing. His intricate plan was a burden he carried too. He dedicated himself fully to his work, finding a deep, quiet satisfaction in creating functional, beautiful spaces. Each new project, each carefully drawn line, was a deliberate contrast to the emptiness and artifice of his former marriage. Adam even participated in a local community project, designing a new town library. He poured his expertise into it, finding a sense of purpose that transcended personal grievances, a way to contribute something positive, something lasting. He realized that paying the price wasn't just Bethany's burden. It was his too, in the years spent enduring the slow erosion of his spirit, then in the months of cold, calculated execution. He considered the morality of his actions, wondering if, in seeking justice, he had become what he despised. But he always came back to the same conclusion. He hadn't sought to destroy, only to rectify. He simply sought justice for years of injustice. He found the Mont Blanc pen, the one Bethany had given him years ago, tucked away in a drawer. He had kept it, a small, polished symbol. Now he donated it to a charity auction for the new library project, a symbolic release of the past, a quiet severing of the last tangible link. Bethany, for the first time in years, truly lost her status, her power, and her ability to control the narrative of her own life. She was forced to confront the wreckage of her choices, with no one left to blame but herself. Adam felt a final quiet satisfaction. The list had been thoroughly addressed. Bethany had indeed paid a price. Adam Miller established Miller Designs. His own name, his own vision, focused on understated, practical designs reflecting a quiet Midwestern sensibility. The firm slowly gained a reputation for integrity and quiet excellence, attracting clients who valued his thoughtful approach over ostentation. He occasionally saw articles or mentions of Frank Thorne, whose company had weathered the scandal but remained subtly diminished in the public eye. The empire had cracked. An unexpected email arrived one morning, a sincere apology from an old friend of Bethany's, admitting she had seen the truth of Adam's suffering all along. It was a small validation, quietly received. Adam took up woodworking, finding a therapeutic calm in shaping raw materials with his hands, creating something tangible and true. He cautiously began dating again, choosing someone kind and grounded, a woman who valued authenticity over appearances. The memory of Bethany's cruelty and the cold satisfaction of his meticulous revenge still lingered, a quiet shadow in the corners of his mind. But it no longer defined him. He accepted that some scars never fully heal. They served as reminders of strength and lessons learned. Adam found a new sense of peace in his simple, honest life, far removed from the glitz and pretense that had once consumed him. He visited Mark Jensen often, their friendship deepened by the shared secret in Adam's arduous journey. He continued to apply the lessons from his list, ensuring he never let another person diminish his worth or pride. He observed the changes in himself, recognizing the man he was now, stronger, more discerning, but also more aware of the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. The story ended not with a triumphant flourish, but with the quiet hum of a life rebuilt, a Midwestern dawn breaking over a landscape irrevocably changed but finding its way forward. Adam sometimes reflected on the nature of justice, realizing it often came with its own costs, but that reclaiming one's dignity was priceless. He closed the final chapter of his old life, looking out at the open plains, feeling a quiet hope for what lay ahead, a man finally free. Adam Miller established his own architectural firm, Miller Designs. It was a reflection of him, understated and practical, attracting clients who valued integrity over flashy displays. He occasionally heard of Frank Thorne's company, subtly diminished but still standing. A quiet, unexpected apology came from an old friend of Bethany's, acknowledging Adam's past suffering. He found therapeutic calm in woodworking, shaping raw materials with his hands. He cautiously began dating, choosing a kind, grounded woman who valued authenticity. The memory of Bethany's cruelty and the cold satisfaction of his revenge remained a quiet shadow. He accepted that some scars never fully heal. They served as reminders of strength and lessons learned. Adam found a new sense of peace in his simple, honest life, far removed from the pretense that once consumed him. He regularly visited Mark Jensen, their friendship deepened by the shared secret. Adam ensured he never again let another person diminish his worth. He observed the man he had become, stronger, more discerning, keenly aware of the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. His rebuilt life hummed with quiet purpose. Adam sometimes reflected on justice, realizing its costs, but understanding that reclaiming his dignity was priceless. He closed the final chapter of his old life, looking out at the open plains, a man finally free.